Prosecutor.
How you doing?
I am well. I'm at the end of a weird day today, so I appreciate you coming back here.
Hey, no problem. I see we're recording this time, so
we are recording this time.
Yeah.
I am not the most technically advanced guy, and I've been online with an IT guy for I don't know, 2.5 hours teaching me some different stuff. So and I was like, dude, I don't want to get my grits overcooked, because he was like, well, here, do this. And he got me into Zoom, and he said, basically, anytime I start a meeting now, it'll start recording. I'll never have that issue again. And he was like, it was just catastrophic. I mean, because I'm a perfectionist with this. I mean, I know a lot of people don't really talk about it. I'll edit all this junk out. A lot of people don't talk about what they do behind the scenes, but I was a broadcaster years ago. I worked for CBS Radio, and really all I had to do was come in and open my mic. Everything else was automated. It was just the beginning of touch screen stuff. And to do all of this by myself now is weird. I mean, you're the talent, you're the engineer, you're the producer, you're the everything. And I'm old now. I was 25 years younger back then. It's a little different, but I'm getting the hang of it.
Yeah. No, I get it. So
I've got some youth. I got some youth behind me, because the guys that I knew that were doing it back in the day, they're just as antiquated as I am. So and I'm like, but you were on top of it back then. They never graduated. And
technology changes, though.
Yes. So one guy was just like, I can get my camcorder, and I'm like, dude, you can make movies on iPhones now. You don't need a camcorder anymore unless you got a real camera. And we got into some discussions, and I just found myself around the 20s and the 30s, because they know all the technology. My grandson's 5, and he knows how to get in and out of my phone better than I can.
Because you know why? It's like another appendage for kids. They grow up with it now. It's like another hand.
Right. He literally, he likes to write, but he doesn't have to. They're already at iPads and tablets and different things, and I'm like, no, he's going to learn how to write. He's going to learn how to do things manually, because somebody may turn out the lights one day, and what, is he supposed to stop working? Is he supposed to stop learning? No, he's got to learn. And I'm a little different with my grandchildren than I was with my kids, because they were right at the beginning of all the technology. They knew how to do really well and things like that. But now they don't. Everything's text. And I just found out that K is disrespectful. I have to say okay, or they look at just the letter K. They look at it as
it's like passive aggressive.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, I was like, I thought I was being quick. And they were like, no, that's
yeah, right.
So I'm having to relearn how to talk at 50, almost 51 years old. So, but yeah, we had a great conversation, and I really just kind of want to rehash a little bit, because you had a busy month, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, and you held it back good. I like the way you did that, because you knew all that stuff was going to happen, obviously, or the way it was going to lay out. And I was like, damn. I mean, everything, and I've had to answer questions because I talked to you that day. Everybody felt like, oh, so he must have told you. And I'm like, no, he didn't, dude. I was like, it wasn't even on the table. I had my questions, and I asked my questions, and he answered them, and we just had a good discussion. But people thought that I knew stuff that I didn't know, and it's always funny. But I really just want to kind of go back a little bit and talk about, I'm not big on introductions and all that stuff. I mean, dude, you're a celebrity now. And in the truest form.
The most minor of celebrities.
Yeah, you are a local celebrity. And it's so funny, because I was going through some of your Facebook posts, and some of the things you're doing, they're trailblazing, groundbreaking, whatever, we can use all those words. But they make sense. Once you get into it, it just makes sense. And the headline and the caption of the post, that's going to catch people's eyes. But once you read into it, that's really where, I try to tell people, I'm like, because my buddy was calling me, he's like, oh, so he's just going to stop pimping, and he's going to stop, and I'm like, look, it has nothing to do, prostitution and pimping. I was like, it's being smart. I was like, do you really aggressively go after a sex worker, or do you try to find, why is that person out there?
Right.
Why is that person out there? What put them in that life? And he's trying to get to that, get to the root of it versus just chopping off the flower. Let's get to the root of the issue, why there's a sex worker or sex workers out there. And just certain questions I was having to answer just because they knew I had a discussion with you. But I kind of want to go back to, because a lot of people still don't understand when you say no cash bail, they think you're opening up the jail.
Right.
You and Sheriff Clayton have gotten together and said, you know what, I can commit a crime and he's in here, and you just send him back out on the street. And it's really not that, you know. And just in your briefest form, can you, is briefest? No, it's not a word. In your most brief form, can you just let people know what no cash bail or doing away with the cash bail system, what it does and who it helps? Because
Sure.
we obviously know who it hurts, but who it helps, because I think that's still a big issue out here, that people think that you just said, you know, no more criminals, you know, nobody's committing crimes anymore if they can just get out of jail without posting bail. Let me get rid of some of this audio here.
Yeah, sure. So I think it is important to take a step back and just talk about what cash bail is.
Right.
Cash bail is not punishment. It's not the punishment for your crime. Cash bail is the system in which you're arrested for a crime. You're charged, right? But before your trial, before you've been convicted of anything, you are sitting in jail, and you could sit for days or weeks or months, sometimes years. Until and unless you come up with a certain amount of money to buy your way out. Right. So all of this takes place before you've been found guilty of anything and before you've been sentenced to anything by a court. And it's all based on how much money you have in your bank account. Now, the reason that cash bail is used is really twofold. It's supposed to be used to make sure that you show up for your trial, but sort of over time, the system has started to use cash bail as sort of a shortcut to doing what it thinks protects public safety. And that's all well and good. Look, I get it. If you are accused of shooting at somebody, you're accused of a murder, right? We think there's enough evidence that you did it, that we're comfortable bringing charges. You've got to be held pending trial because you've demonstrated that you pose a threat to the safety of the community. But absolutely, here's what we're saying with no cash bail. Your money, the size of your bank account shouldn't play a role in whether you're held. Because think about cash bail. Cash bail means that if you're poor or if you're working class, right, you could sit in jail for days, weeks, or months, even if you pose no danger to the community, even if you're charged with a really minor crime, simply because you don't have any money in your bank account. And take the flip side of it too, right? Cash bail system, if you're relying on cash bail, it means that if you're a wealthy person and you did something that really poses a danger to the community, or you pose a continued danger to the community, you're going to be out. Right. Because you've got money in your bank account. Right. So when we said we're not seeking cash bail, and you can read the policy, everything that I do and everything that our prosecutor's office does is right there for people to look at on the website. We did not say we're not trying to hold anybody pending trial. I agree. There are people that need to be held pending trial. All we said is we're taking money out of the equation. So what we're doing is we are seeking to impose non-monetary conditions that ensure public safety, which may include you being held. So look, if you are somebody that committed a murder, if you are somebody that, committed an armed robbery, and there's reason to believe that you're going to do it again, we're going to seek to hold you without bail. And by the way, that's going to be true whether you are poor or working class, or whether your dad's a millionaire. Right. If you pose a danger, I don't care how much money your daddy has or how much money you have, you should be held to keep the community safe. But if you are not a danger, I don't want somebody sitting in jail, again, before they've been convicted of anything, simply because they don't have enough money to pay to get out. And, part of this is about, of course, the fundamental fairness to the person that's been accused of a crime, but you've also got to take stock of what happens to that person's loved ones, that person's kids, that person's community. Think about this. The data shows, the research shows, if you are working class, you work a shift job, right? you're held in jail for even a couple of days pending trial because you can't afford to pay to get out, you are more likely than not to lose your job.
Absolutely.
Now, what happens if you lose your job? If you lose your job, you may well lose your housing. You got kids, your kids may be homeless. They may have to go live with a relative. They may have to switch schools in the middle of the year, which is really disruptive to a kid's education. And the whole reason for this was simply because you didn't have enough money to pay, not because of your dangerousness. So by having an approach that is actually based on the dangerousness that somebody poses to the community, not on how much money you have in your bank account, we both eliminate those sort of cascading harms that accrue when somebody is held in jail just because they're poor, and their kids may suffer and their family may suffer. And by the way, they might commit more crimes of desperation because now they've got no other way to earn a buck.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And at the same time, we're saying to wealthy people that do things that harm the community, which happens, right? We don't care how much money you have.
Right.
You're a danger.
Right.
And so we're going to seek to hold you pending trial to keep the community safe. The other thing that I'll just mention is all of this, like I said, all of this is before the trial and before you get a sentence. So even if you're out on cash bail because we didn't, or out pending trial without bail because we didn't think you were a threat, it doesn't mean that you're immune from punishment. We're still prosecuting the case. If something deserves prison time, we're still going to seek prison time. We might seek probation. You're going to get your sentence at the end of it, but it's going to be after a trial and an opportunity to present a defense, which is what we have in this country. We should all be grateful for that. And after that, after you're convicted, then the punishment phase starts. But all of this is before that, and nothing we're doing with bail has anything to do with the sort of punishment phase of the system.
Right. And one of the things I had to point to some people, like a lot of people don't know still to this day the story of Khalif Browder.
Yeah.
Been able to get out of jail for $3,500. And to you or I, $3,500 is not the biggest mountain to climb. But for someone who is economically challenged, he was falsely accused of stealing someone's backpack and put on Rikers Island at 16. That was immediately going to make him a criminal. Just going into Rikers Island, you can't go in there, and not become something. And he eventually got out. He was assisted by some people, some notable people, and they got him out. But he still ended up killing himself because of the irreversible damage that happened in Rikers Island. Then we have just a few weeks ago, the young lady who stole Nancy Pelosi's laptop. She was an adult. She's actually an adult. She was released into the custody of her parents. I just find that I'm like, well, wait a minute. And then she had already said that she was trying to sell this computer, not really knowing what could have been on it, but she was willing to sell that to a known enemy of this country, but she's released. Now, is she more of a threat to Khalif Browder? In my eyes, absolutely, because if she tried something like that, who's to say she's not going to try something? It might not be at that height because she might not be working with that faction of people. But she stole a computer of the Speaker of the House and was willing to sell it to Russians for whatever. I mean, to simply maybe the attempt to overthrow the government, whereas she was released into the custody of her parents. Now, let's just say, hypothetically, you're in a prosecutor's chair in that type of situation. Was that fair? Her being released? I mean, knowing the crime, knowing what she's being accused of, was that fair to release her, knowing that what her possible motives were, or not maybe fair, but was it justified? Isn't she somewhat of a danger to society, knowing what her motives were?
Well, you know what, and I'm glad you brought up Khalif Browder, because Khalif Browder was killed by our criminal justice system.
Absolutely.
He technically took his own life, but this is a 16-year-old kid accused of taking a backpack.
Right.
He always maintained his innocence, and eventually the prosecutors had to drop the case. He was never convicted of anything, but he spent years on Rikers Island because he couldn't afford that initial $3,500 bond, and it traumatized him so much that he hung himself from his parents' home. He was killed by the system, and as we say the names of people who have lost their life as a result of law enforcement, Khalif Browder's name needs to be among them. That was a child. He was a child held because he was poor for something that he probably didn't do.
Exactly.
Again, the presumption of innocence. All this before you're convicted of anything. So I'm glad you brought up Khalif Browder. I'll give you an even better example on the other side. You mentioned the woman who stole Nancy Pelosi's laptop. Kyle Rittenhouse. Remember this guy? Kyle Rittenhouse goes and kills 2 people at rallies protesting the shooting of Jacob Blake, crosses state lines, goes to this rally with an AR-15 gun and murders 2 people. He's being charged with murder, right? He has a presumption of innocence just like everybody else, but he's being charged with murder. Goes back across state lines, is arrested. Kyle Rittenhouse is out now. You know why Kyle?
He's eating dinner tonight. He's eating dinner at home.
$2 million cash bail. He had a high cash bail.
Yeah.
Able to pay it. So cash bail doesn't keep us safe. There is no way that Kyle Rittenhouse, a man who murdered 2 other people at a political protest because he did not like their views, allegedly, again, that he should be out pending trial at this time of probably the most dangerous political strife that we've had in recent memory in this country. This is a person, he crossed state lines. He went looking for trouble, right? And he killed 2 people. $2 million didn't keep him in jail. It didn't. Right. He was able to buy his way out. And we need to not have 2 systems of justice, one in which a poor black kid who probably didn't do it, right, is in jail for months, years, in Khalif Browder's case, for allegedly stealing a backpack, and one in which a wealthier white guy who murders 2 people allegedly is out pending trial when all the circumstances going on in this country indicate that he may be a real threat to do so again. Kyle Rittenhouse should have been held pending trial, period. No bail. Khalif Browder should have been released pending trial without bail, back to his family and back to his community. And he should have been able to fight his charges without jail hanging over his head.
And I mean, and understanding the way Rittenhouse got out, I mean, I'm a big fighter. I am a big opponent of white supremacy. And I looked at Ricky Schroeder, and I believe it was the other guy, the pillow guy, I think that
the My Pillow guy. Yeah.
They put up the $2 million for him. And, you know, we know that guy is a huge supporter of Donald Trump. Ricky Schroeder, I didn't even realize that he would even have $1 million to put up at this point. He hasn't, you know, I mean, he's done those Dolly Parton movies and stuff the last few years for Christmases, but I didn't even think he would have that type of money. But to come back into the public eye, and here's a guy that I watched as a child. I watched Silver Spoons. I loved Ricky Schroeder and Alfonso Ribeiro and all those guys back in the day. And I'm just thinking to myself, you know, this kid killed 2 people.
Yeah.
No, he murdered 2 people. And there's deep things with this situation. I mean, once we found out that he bought the AR-15, or his mother had bought the AR-15 with his stimulus check. He bought it with his COVID relief fund check. But how come his mother hasn't been brought up on charges because of that? I mean, she bought him that assault rifle to go do what he did. He's not a hunter. He didn't need that gun for any other reason. Why is she not being played into this equation? I don't want to sit all night on Kyle Rittenhouse, but isn't that kind of the way it goes? If you're a part of the crime, don't you go down maybe for lesser charges? She didn't shoot, but, you know, she aided and abetted. I mean, something.
Yeah, and I don't know all the facts relating to it or the relevant law in Wisconsin around this. But what I will say is you know, she drove him away, right? She drove him back to Illinois after he shot 2 people. In a lot of circumstances, you see somebody shoot 2 people and you drive the getaway car, you're in for aiding and abetting. Now I don't want to, you know, again, I'm always really hesitant to get into these, you know, well, you know, it's another prosecutor should have charged this, the other things. I don't know all the evidence. I don't know that, you know, especially in other states, all of the relevant laws. But you raise a good point. Back to the bail, by the way, he's back living with his mom now, as I understand it. And you talk about like keeping the community safe. She's somebody who encouraged this. She drove him to the rally in Wisconsin where he killed 2 people. She drove him back from it. How are we keeping the community safe just by putting that bail amount on his release and then letting him go right back to the circumstances that he was in when he killed 2 people. It doesn't keep our community safe. Cash bail is not about safety. It is a fundamentally discriminatory way of doing justice that favors wealthier people, or in Rittenhouse's case, people with access to resources one way or another, and systemically disadvantages everybody else.
And what in that case, because I know in other states that it's one, they sometimes will give you a bail and it's high. Kill multiple people, sometimes it goes to like no bail, like, you know, they won't give you a bond. There were multiple people. So how did he get that bond? I mean, could that have been politically driven? I mean, to even give him a bond? I mean, and that the circumstances, you know, it wasn't like it was self-defense or anything like that, but the circumstances around him killing a couple people, how do you even give him a bond, you know, and put him in that position? It's just really weird the way the system works sometimes. I don't see that for someone else. I don't see that for somebody that looks like me. Let me just be honest.
Right.
If I kill 2 people, if I drive from Ann Arbor to Kenosha and I kill 2 people, I think I'm still sitting.
Yeah.
I just think I am. I mean, and my cynicism runs high, but I just don't see somebody. Would they be able to gather 2 million? It's a stretch for me. I mean, I don't know that many wealthy people. I know a couple, but if they knew I did something wrong, they'd probably be like, you know what, you're gonna sit your ass in jail. See, that was the other thing about him being that young. I think she didn't want to see him get fed, because if he stayed in there long enough and he worked his way to, you know, some different circumstances, he might have not made it to his trial, based on, you know, what we know about people being inside. So, but yeah, I don't want to sit there on him, but I understand the cash bail system, and I understand that it definitely has hurt more people that, like I said, that look like me, and it's aided people who may look like yourself, but it's what's right is right. I mean, if you deserve to be in jail, I'm sure you guys can find a place for them to sit, you know, until their trial. But as far as that goes, when somebody's in there for writing bad checks, and I don't really know who writes checks anymore, they do other stuff with digital systems, I guess. Something like that, if they didn't physically harm someone, they probably don't need to sit in jail, unless they're a danger, unless they did something that was aggravated to someone. You know, they snatched a purse and then went and did something. I mean, if they did some type of salty move, but we're talking about a guy that's just sitting on a computer and he's just moving money around illegally. He's probably not that much of a threat, even though he knows he's going to get in trouble. He'll probably show up for court, you know, maybe take his punishment or do whatever you guys need to do. But he's just not someone I need to see sitting in jail, because if he gets in there, and I had put in one of my captions, you know, jail births criminals. A lot of times, you know, they find out what he's in there for. The next thing you know, he's teaching some guy to do it, and he's on the phone, and he's teaching other people on the outside how to do what this guy is already on the inside.
I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, because there's been studies done that show precisely that is the case. That if you go to jail, you are more likely than not to commit a future crime and to commit a more serious crime. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that, right? One is it increases economic desperation, so you may have more of a motive. But the other thing is, jail is a good networking opportunity, right? And who's networking with there? So the data actually very clearly shows, and these are really robust studies, that if you are held in jail pre-trial on cash bail, it actually makes you more likely to commit a future crime than if you're released pre-trial, right? So we're not keeping the community safe. In the long term, we're actually creating more crime through this system for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. So that intuition is, it's been proven. It's been proven. And expungements, it got really big, during the whole legalization process, people getting a lot of marijuana convictions and things like that turned over. And I've often said that, getting your record expunged is good, but you still got that hole in your resume. Is there anything on the county side or on the state side that can be done for people that they get their record cleaned up, but from 05 to 09, they don't show any work history? If you're an employer, you're going to ask, hey, what you been doing for the last 4 years, or what did you do
for these 4 years. You got to come up with a story. Is there a way to get people some type of, I don't know exactly, some type of endorsement? Because if you're trying to really work your way back into society, and that is hamstringing you every time you go looking for a job because you got a hole in your resume, what can be done on the county side or the state side to help people work themselves back into, you know, workforce job and really to try to stay out of the gig economy? I'm a big opponent of the gig economy because I think it's taking people out of real working situations, and understanding that there's less jobs right now, but we need workers to really be working, you know, and gig economy to be what it is, but not to be. I don't need to see a person that does Grubhub, DoorDash, Lyft, and Uber. Because all those hours that they put in, those are more hours that they're taking away from not raising their kids and being with their family, and they're really just running themselves in the ground and chasing their tail. So is there anything that can be done, or has that been looked at yet, that people that do get their record expunged, because they're given that now what type of thing sometimes, you know?
Right. So there's a couple of things there, and I'll say this is not something, you know, there's some things that our office can do by ourselves, right? But it's mostly at the front end, right?
Okay.
We're not seeking cash bail. We can say we're not charging certain things, and we can say that we're not going to contest expungements. And in fact, you know, I'm looking forward to rolling out something in the coming months where we're going to be providing more affirmative help in getting people's records expunged. I'm really excited about what we've been building around that. The reason, by the way, that I'm passionate about this issue is, first of all, because of a fundamental fairness issue. I just don't think that, you know, you make one mistake, it should follow you around for the rest of your life, especially because people make stupid mistakes when they're young. You know, you go in, you serve your sentence, right? You come back out, you do everything we ask you to do. Why are we continuing to hold this albatross around people's necks that can prevent them from getting housing, from getting jobs, from continuing their education? But the other thing is that even if I didn't care about that, which I do, you know, my job is fundamentally protecting public safety. And, you know, public safety means protecting public safety in the long term. And the deeply ironic thing is that what we do to people with a criminal record in terms of denying them access to housing, to jobs, to educational opportunities, those things that we deny them are exactly the three things that make it less likely that somebody is going to commit a future crime. So it's so counterproductive, and it leads not just to unfairness on the part of the defendant, but to more victims down the road. So it's really a public safety concern too. Now, in terms of what you raised, you know, what can we do to fill that gap in the resume and to get people good jobs? Because good jobs are the best way of getting somebody on the right track. There's a few things. One is I'm a really big fan of vocational opportunities in prisons, in jails that can get people trained up for jobs that they can that are in demand and that they can enter the day that they're released. There's some good programs in the Michigan Department of Corrections right now. I think they need to be expanded upon. You know, the demand is sort of through the roof for them. That takes funding from the state, but to my mind, that's an investment that pays off long term, because you get somebody a good paying job when they get out, you're not seeing them back in the prison system again. You're not the $40,000 plus a year to lock them up. So it's a good investment. The other thing is, you know, and this, and again, my direct influence on this, other than as an advocate, gets more and more remote the further along you go in the system. You know, basically, once we get the conviction, then it's, you know, you're in the state's custody, and certainly once you're released. But I've been thinking about this, and what I really think, and we've had some conversations with community partners around this, and we do have a great group of folks who are thinking about these issues in Washtenaw County. I want to say that, but we've got to lift up the businesses that do provide returning citizens a opportunity. And you know, I'll just give you an example. Right down the road from my office here is the Detroit Street Filling Station. And the owner of that restaurant, Phyllis Engelbert, she makes it a point to hire people who have served time and to hire people who are in recovery. And she works with, you know, their schedules to make sure they're able to make their shifts. She gives them management opportunities. If they've got to take off to go check in with their parole or probation officer, she's accommodating to that. She deserves people's business, straight up, she does. And, you know, I think that, you know, we have a community that is in many ways supportive of folks getting a fresh opportunity. And so we should be patronizing those businesses and lifting up the ones that provide them that, you know. So I'll say Detroit Street Filling Station, it's vegetarian food, but take it from me, I'm definitely a meat eater. It's good too. And you know, we should support businesses like that. You know, I'd like to see some sort of incentives for businesses to hire folks that are returning citizens. You know, that'd take state level.
Weren't there some things though before? Because I remember Chi-Chi's. You remember Chi-Chi's restaurant out on South State?
Yeah.
They were big into hiring convicted felons, and even the subsequent restaurants after did that. And I don't know exactly what type of program it was. I actually was employed by someone who told me he got perks from the government, because I was noticing that a lot of our staff were convicted felons. And actually several of them were sex offenders. And I was like, why does everybody kind of got the same type of conviction here? You know, they went through the same stuff. Well, he got some type of perk from the government for hiring now. And there were some rules that came with it. They weren't supposed to have any access to electronics and for internet and different things like that. And when I became an ops manager for him, he was just like, you know, that guy can't be around a computer and this guy can't be around. And I didn't know all those stipulations, but I knew there were some programs. Are those types of things not available anymore? I mean, this was years back. Are they not available statewide anymore? I don't see the county really reaching out. And this is what I was talking about, my village.
Yeah.
I think our village has changed a little bit. Our village is made up of a lot of transients who are in control, more so than the homegrown people, because Ann Arborites, they tended to look out for each other back in the day. Now we've got more of an elitist nature around here. And I'm looked at as even an outsider. And I'm like, whoa, I've been here longer than you've been in this planet. So you can't look at me as an outsider. There's just certain things that I think Detroit Filling Station.
Yeah.
I'm not only going to pub that place, but I would patronize that place, because you hire the people, the very people that are, truthfully, if you got ex-cons on your staff and they're good employees, they're also going to protect your business for one reason: they need a job, you know. And I'm not saying they've got to be security. I'm just saying that they're going to just basically be better employees than your fly-by-night people who just want to come in and get a job just because this might be this guy's last opportunity. It might be his third strike. I mean, you don't know what type of individual you're bringing in. At least sit him down, talk to him, and then see what you got. But
yeah, you know, and it's interesting. If you look at some of the employer surveys that do hire returning citizens are some of the best employees that you can have. They're more likely to stay at the job longer. They're less likely to miss work. Right. And you can look at, there was Johns Hopkins University, right? Like a medical center. They started hiring a bunch of returning citizens, and they did a study tracking, you know, how long they stayed, what was their work performance, and they outperformed the folks without a criminal record. I think it's precisely because of the reasons that you mentioned. Now that said, there are real reasons that businesses don't hire returning citizens, even if they don't bear prejudice against them, in part because there's a lot of really onerous restrictions that are placed on them, right? And so, you know, you got to check in with your probation officer in the middle of the day, or, you know, maybe you're not able to afford to live close and you lack transportation. And so I think what we should be doing, in addition to lifting up the businesses that go above and beyond, like Detroit Street Filling Station, who works closely with their employees to make it such that they can get to work and that they get their shift covered if they've got a probation check-in or something like that. But we've also got to be reducing those barriers to employees or employers to hire folks. At the end of the day, I mean, they do have to run a business, and you can understand the sort of reason that you might say, well, I'd love to hire you, but I just can't afford to have you take off, in the middle of your shift to do a drug test or something like that.
Right.
So that is something that I think the government needs to do. Again, it's got to be cross-sector, because this involves like parole, which is under the authority of the Michigan Department of Corrections, probation. It certainly involves like the sentence that somebody got in the first place. But we need to do everything possible to reduce or eliminate those barriers, because again, it's counterproductive when we are setting up hurdles to returning citizens to get gainful employment, to keep it.
Right. And I guess the thing for me, the worse than being unemployed is being underemployed, because now you're trying so hard to make ends meet and then it's not happening. The next best thing that you got is committing another crime. You got to go hit a lick because you're not making enough money doing it the right way. So you dip back into that lifestyle. You'll hold on to that gig. You'll hold on to what's keeping you struggling, but you got to go do something more. And that's what I'm just saying. We got to make sense of this. I mean, are we pushing people back into crime by having them be underemployed or being involuntarily employed? I mean, there's nothing like needing $700 a week to survive and your jobs are only producing $430.
Yeah.
You got to go find that other 270 somewhere. And that's where, there's only so many other opportunities out there. If you could find those opportunities in Grubhub and DoorDash and Lyft and all that stuff, you do it. But obviously you've maxed out your time and you've maxed out the time you could spend away from your home and your kids. So we've got to make sense into that. And I'm not going to make this the whole thing. This was really for Senator Irwin. We talked a little bit, just off key on the minimum wage thing. I mean, just reading that whole minimum wage bill and finding out that things aren't going to happen till 2025, and hopefully that all gets revised. I'm looking at people don't have enough money now to do the things that they need to take care of themselves. What about the probationary and costs that I was down in was it 36th district, whatever it is in Detroit, and I sat and I was down the list. I mean, Ellie, I was probably 30th that day. Everybody got the same probation costs. I didn't understand it, and maybe is there a state mandate? It was like 1180 and something cents, and they kept giving everybody the same one. But these were people that didn't have jobs, didn't have this. They weren't going to be able to pay their probation. They're going to end up with a warrant. They're going to go back to jail. Is there something that can be done about basically matching the probationary costs? Even if you got you got to stretch it out. You got to stretch it out. Well, how do you make a person pay $1,000 over a certain period of time when they don't have a job, they don't have resources, and here the other guy can come in and just basically write all of his probationary costs off, and then maybe he's got to report to his probation officer for 6 months, and the guy gets tired of seeing him like, his costs are already paid, because that's really what they want. They want that money. They don't want to see you every month for 28 seconds, and say, are you working? Have you committed a crime? Are you doing this? And then you're out. They would rather just have you off the slate. And that's those probationary costs. Is there a way to, I'm not saying get rid of them, but get around them, knowing that, hey, sometimes probationary costs will put a person right back just as quick as committing a crime.
There's no question about it. And we really need to look hard at how our justice system is funded, because what we try to do is we try to pass it on with basically user costs, right? And this isn't just probation; it's also the sort of fines and fees and everything like that often funds court operations, right? Mm-hmm. And so now if you're a judge, you're sort of thinking about your budget in the back of your mind, right, when you're imposing monetary conditions as part of a sentence. I think statewide, the average is like 26% of court costs are funded by fines and fees, which is a huge percentage, and it goes up a lot depending on the court that you're in. Okay. We really need to get away from that, and I got to be honest, that takes state level action, but for the reasons you mentioned, it is so counterproductive to just impose these costs of probation, impose fines and fees and the like on people, and then to sort of punish them when they're unable to come up with it. You can't get blood out of a stone, right? But that's what we try to do constantly. And it's making more people who really just may have made one mistake and got trapped in the system. They become criminalized over and over and over again just because they're poor, right? So but I gotta be honest, like it's because of, frankly, in my view, the screwed up way in which we fund things at the state level. And it's not like local units of government have many options other than to rely on that stuff to fund operations, which is something that really needs to be taken up in Lansing. And you know, Michigan is not unique on this. It's true across the United States, but it is so counterproductive and so harmful, I think, to getting somebody on the right path, which is supposedly what the justice system is about.
And I can bring up examples probably on pretty much anything that I'm asking you. And a situation like that was, you know, with Walter Scott, you know, this gentleman was shot in the back by a police officer. Now that's two big wrongs right there, because he shouldn't have been shot. The police officer shouldn't have been in a position to where, because Walter Scott was running away with his arms up and he was shot, but he owed for child support. And he didn't want to go back to jail for child support. And as a man who has arrears to this day with friend of the court, but I've got a really good working relationship with them. They don't mess with me anymore. And I used to go down there and he's just really screwed up. And now, just as an adult, not an adult, but an old man, I understand it wasn't those people. It was the system that they were just trying to uphold. Now, for Walter Scott, he was trying not to go to jail. I never really dug into Walter Scott's background, but I would imagine the man probably had a job. And he probably had a home that he lived in. He probably had, you know, there are other people. He had children. He had child support. You shoot a man who is wanted for child support in the back. He was no danger to anybody. He was no danger to society. And having that fear and running away obviously means that jail is much worse. And he doesn't want to go back to jail, or at least, I mean, I think it was South Carolina was where that was.
North Carolina, I forget, yeah.
Somewhere down there.
One of the Carolinas. It was definitely one of the Carolinas, I forget.
One of the Carolinas. And I'm thinking to myself, jail's got to be that bad for him not to want to go back for child support. I mean, how long would he be in there? I don't know, 60, 90 days. I don't know. But he ran.
Yeah.
He feared, and he ran, and he was just, but this, he's not a cop to me. I mean, I don't believe in bad cops. I believe in race soldiers with badges. I believe, hey, there's black people that are bad with badges. I just don't believe you should be a bad cop. I think you're a bad individual with a badge and a gun. But those types of things, you know, they're screwed up with this system where people just owing money can lose their life for whatever reason, sending them to jail, or he's just out there, you know, in the middle of the street and you shoot him in his back running away. I don't understand those things. Those things don't compute. And I haven't heard about a lot of them happening around Washtenaw County, and hopefully we never do. But, you know, when I start talking about certain things, other things kind of come up. And we got into talking a little bit about community policing last time. And since this whole situation with the insurrection and all the other stuff that's happened, I think there's going to be a bigger need for it, you know, not just locally, but nationally. I think communities need to come together because we've already seen that we really can't trust our law enforcement. I mean, we had a ton of law enforcement. It was like 1 in 5 people, they were saying, or something like that, was connected somehow to law enforcement that stormed the Capitol. So if we can't trust the people that are supposed to be protecting us, then we've got to protect us. You know, and community policing, I think, is one way that we can do that in Washtenaw County, you know, because of all the different pockets. I heard about some things that, you know, are possibly going to be happening with the county, but I don't know exactly how that really works when it gets down to somebody like myself. I mean, the street I live on is a pretty decent street, and we don't have the neighborhood watch signs anymore, you know. So pretty much everybody just kind of has to look out for one another. But if we had to say that we had a community police, it would probably be me. I mean, I don't allow people to sit out in front of my house or my neighbor's house just to sit there. You know, I mean, there's a reason why you're just sitting there. Then I found out we're a Pokemon site. So, you know, we've got the wife. So I found out we were stopped.
Are people still playing that?
Huh?
Are people still playing that?
Oh my God, it's crazy. They stop right out in front of the house, you know, and I got a flashlight sometimes if I'm sitting in the driveway. And people are really nice about it. But yeah, there's a park right across the street and it's destination site. So yeah, they're still playing it. But community policing, I think, is something that it was really big back in the day, and you couldn't get into some neighborhoods, some subdivisions, unless you talk to the natives. I think we need to get back to that and protecting ourselves, because we just don't know who's who anymore. And even with the police, if the police come in with the wrong energy, there's probably going to be some bad results that happen. And I think we need to start holding each other accountable. How does that sit with, say, the prosecutor's office, knowing that you have, I mean, and I'm not saying that we're going to be all like sheriffs of justice out here, and dressed in berets and Boy Scout uniforms and stuff like that, but we want to protect what we've got. I want to protect my village. You know, hell, I talk to people about dropping trash on the street and throwing stuff on the street. I think that's community policing, because technically it's a fine. You get a fine if you litter. Yeah. But if there's no cop around, who gives you the ticket? Here, a grumpy old man walks up and say, "Hey man, why don't you throw that in the trash?" I mean, the trash can is like 6 feet down the road. Just throw it in the trash. They look at me generally, but they most of the time they pick it up. How do you guys view stuff like that, you know, with the new regime of the prosecutor's office? I never would have asked Mackie that question. So how do you see stuff like that?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I mean, I generally think that if you've got, you know, sort of a neighborhood and a sense of cohesion, and you know, you can sort of take care of things without involving law enforcement, the sort of minor things, that's so much better, right? Your neighbors having a party and playing the music too loud, you know?
Right.
If you've got a community where, you know, you feel safe and it's comfortable, just knock on the door and say, "Hey, you know, I got to work in the morning. Like, you mind turning it down a little bit?"
Right.
And the person there in the door is, you know, would say, "My bad. Didn't realize we were getting that loud. I'll definitely turn it down a little bit for you." That's so much better than calling the police out there and having the police knock on the door, you know, because they come up and that's where tensions can escalate and something can go wrong and people can feel like they're sort of under the thumb of the government. So, you know, I'm a big supporter of that. If we can address harm without ever involving law enforcement or without ever involving the prosecutor's office, that's so much better. I think it lowers tensions, right? Both within the neighborhood and you know, also between civilians and police and prosecutors. You know, you think about it in that example. Neighbors playing music loud next door. If you call the cops on them, from that point forward, you are going to be the neighbor that called the cops on, right?
You'll never get over that.
Exactly.
You'll never get past that.
Right. If you feel okay knocking on the door, right, then you know you're the neighbor that maybe you got two senses of hearing. I'm not saying you're going to be best friends, but like you didn't call the cops on them, right? And that's not something that stays with somebody. So I'm very much in favor of that. And look, you know, in the long term, what really keeps us safe is these sort of healthy connections that we have to each other, and you know, a sense of cohesion and you know a sense of well-being in the places that we live. So I'm all about it. Frankly, you know, honest to God, I'm busy these days, but my ideal is if I could just sit in my office and nothing would happen. You know, no new charges filed by police today. Nothing got to a point where we needed law enforcement.
Right.
Great. I would love to be put out of a job, you know, if we had a world like that. Now that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Right.
There's going to be really serious stuff that you just do need the police. I don't recommend knocking on your neighbor's door if they're, you know, you hear a gunshot or something like that.
Right.
The police then. But in the long term, that's what we all should want. The truth of the matter is, by the time the police and the prosecutors get involved, really, we've all failed as a society. That is a failure. The mere fact that I'm reading about something in my office here means that we've failed, and in some respect, we all bear responsibility for it. So I am all about what you described, and I think we all should be.
And I mean, you know, like I said, I can bring up examples, and I think of Atiana Jefferson, you know, who her neighbor
called the police just for a wellness check because her door was cracked. And her door wasn't cracked. So he said her door was a little, she had just left it ajar. They ended up shooting this woman through her window. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
And what I'm obviously devastated about her, didn't know the woman obviously at all, but I'm devastated that a Black woman lost her life because she got up to check what was going on outside after playing video games with her nephew, I believe it was. But I'm really worried about now that neighbor, because now that neighbor is going to carry that around with them for the rest of their life, right, believing that it's their fault she died. And it's not their fault that they were trying to be a helpful neighbor because they had a decent relationship. They didn't call, and saying, hey, something's wrong's going over, you should come out with your guns drawn and be prepared for some combat. It's like, hey, my neighbor doesn't usually leave her door open like this. Can you check on her? She ends up dead. And that's where community policing didn't go bad. That's where law enforcement was bad. And do you notice these types of things, or do you even dig into this type of stuff? I'm learning that a lot more of these shootings are happening with officers who have not been on the job that long, or there's been officers who have been by themselves and shot people. Should a rookie, more or less rookie cop be riding alone and not have an experienced veteran there to be that voice of reason? I mean, we're seeing that more and more. Is that because law enforcement is thinning and they need to put rookie and rookie together versus rookie and veteran? We see it in the movies. It's always an old grumpy cop with a rookie guy.
Yeah.
But in the real age now, it's like rookie.
I'm not a police chief or a sheriff or anything like that. So,
sure.
So I wouldn't purport to talk about, who you staff and how you staff and how you,
sure,
how you send people out. But what I will say is that law enforcement, and I will say law enforcement in Washtenaw County has been pretty good about this. De-escalation training, right? It's really important that when you arrive at a scene as an officer, how to de-escalate, because the worst thing that happens, and this is where things end up getting deadly, is where the first reaction is to escalate, right?
Right.
And I think it's, look, we see it'll be a pretty boring movie about cops using de-escalation techniques.
Right.
They go to a situation on a call and they talk the guy down, and that's the end of the movie, right? But at the end of the day, that's so much better for everybody. You don't want to have a situation that's already necessarily tense when you've got an officer there. I'd like to say their mere presence there. And I'm not blaming officers for that. I want to be clear about that.
Right.
It's just, a uniformed officer shows up, like there is going to be some tension because an officer is talking to you. And training officers to do everything that they can to de-escalate and only using force when absolutely necessary, I think is key to avoiding these sort of tragedies that happen. And by the way, it's not just about civilians losing their lives. It also protects police officers, right? If you know the escalation, then it's less likely that you're going to be, as an officer, at the other end of a tragedy. So the training is so important, and just building that culture around we de-escalate here, I think is key. And I do give local law enforcement a lot of credit, because I know this is something that is on their mind, which you never want to say that we're immune from any sort of tragedy like this. It can happen anywhere. It can happen with or without the best training. But I think it may be one reason why we haven't had so many high-profile instances like we've seen elsewhere in Washington
County. When we talk about issues like, say, like with mental health, and I've talked with Senator Irwin and Judge Elaine Washington about mental health situations, and most recently we've had two gentlemen be murdered after mental health calls were made, but police officers showed up.
Yeah.
And in those specific situations, if the mental health workers had shown up, and I understand that in police departments, when you call 911 and you ask for something, they're supposed to dispatch who you ask for. So if these weren't de-escalation specialists, why did they show up first, or why did they come try to take on these situations if they were only trained on a more or less one-dimensional, and not really trying to, like I said, I know you don't know the case files, no, you don't know all the instances, but we had 2 instances where those families said we called for mental health situations. These 2 men had histories of mental health issues, but law enforcement showed up and law enforcement ended up taking the lives of both of these men, but we never heard about the social workers of why they didn't come in. Is that something that we have in Washtenaw County? Because I've never heard about these situations until, you hear them come across the TV or online or whatever. Do we have that type of situation? Because we obviously had our roster here, I mean,
yeah.
If we had de-escalation specialists there, maybe, she's in her kitchen cooking dinner tonight.
I agree. I agree. And that was, somebody that was dealing with a mental health issue, and, not only de-escalation, but as you mentioned, maybe the first responders should not have been police, should have been somebody that is a mental health expert. We do have, through community mental health, there are, you can call and get a mental health professional to show up as a sort of rapid response team in Washtenaw County. Now, that's funded in part through the millage that we passed a few years ago. And the truth of the matter is, we talk about resources. Does it always happen? And I don't know the case that you're mentioning. No. And part of the reason is just like fundamentally a lack of resources. But I know this community is trying to make it such that unless there's a real, imminent threat, a hostage situation or something like that, then you gotta send the police, of course. But that if it's a mental health call, the presumption is that the first responders aren't necessarily police, but are trained mental health professionals. On a larger scale, this is really just a resource issue, and it's a question of like where we are putting our resources. And I got to tell you that what keeps me up at night more than anything is I think we are going to see a second pandemic after we get through COVID that is a pandemic of mental health issues, because we've been, cooped up inside. This has been a traumatizing year plus, not even to mention the 4 years of Donald Trump. And I actually don't say that facetiously. Like that was traumatizing for a lot of people, where our country is right now, right? And we're distrustful. We talked about going next door to your neighbor's house. Well, we're probably envisioning a non-COVID world where you might do that. Now you're going to your neighbor's house, and because of the virus, you're both threats to each other's safety. It is a toxic stew of potentially looming mental health issues, and you're seeing this reflected around the country. You've got youth suicides that are through the roof because kids, like teenagers, they're social creatures. They're not meant to be like on online Zoom all day. And we got to do this because of the pandemic. I'm not saying these health measures are
absolutely.
But you're seeing like road rage incidents with guns go through the roof because people are just on edge and don't know how to deal with each other. We're going to be dealing with this even after the pandemic. We're going to be dealing with it for I think a number of years. I hope I'm wrong, but I really worry about the mental health implications, and it's going to make us much less safe, especially if our response to it is just like, well, the criminal justice system can and should respond to that. So what I'm really hoping to see, and I'll say this, we've got this stimulus package that's being debated in Washington. I am hoping that Congress and President Biden do the right thing and think a little bit down the road and have funding allocated to states and local government around mental health specifically, because otherwise we're going to be caught flat-footed, which with what I do think is going to be a second pandemic that's going to make all of us less safe, and it's going to result in a number of different tragedies, not just shooting at each other, but suicides and depression and any host of mental illness related issues. We got to get out ahead of it.
It's crazy because we have 3 different phases happening in our home. I'm out and about daily, so I'm on the road and I see the way people drive. When we've had more restrictions put on us, there's obviously less traffic. People are going less places. When things start to open back up, people are getting back out and driving. But truthfully, Ellie, most people haven't driven on a regular basis for 10 months. So when people get out, they might only be getting out on the road once or twice a week versus when they got out 5 or 6 times a week. You become a bad driver just by inactivity. Yeah. And then those people are nervous, where I'm a very offensive driver, but you make me nervous because you're not confident. Then, you know, Rachel, she works for the University of Michigan, and she's been cooped up. I mean, ever since basically everything shut down, she's been cooped up in the house for 10 months, and she lives in her pajamas. You know, that's not healthy. You know, I mean, and it's become a way of life that she looks forward to actually putting on clothes and going out. And there's people who can't handle that type of separation.
Yeah.
And then we have a teenager, and she talks about some of the nightmares that the teachers are having to go through dealing with the kids online. You would think some of these kids they'd be better off because they have a little bit more freedom, but no, they don't function well having to be pressured to sit like this for 7-8 hours. They're used to moving about every 50-55 minutes, running to the vending machine, getting back to class. All that's been taken away from them. So
they're social creatures.
We're going to be crazy creatures out here.
Yeah.
Once the world opens back up, we're going to have to learn how to live again. So if they don't produce these programs, they don't make funding because there's going to be some fallout.
Yep.
Employers have to know that when you hire someone that's been cooped up in the house, I mean, hey, they may be late for the first couple of weeks because they've been working from home, getting back out into society. They might have forgot that it was 12 minutes to this job versus 7 minutes before, you know, or whatever. Public transportation, you hear about a lot of these bus drivers getting attacked by people's patients. I mean, they have to have some type of mental health funding and be ready to lay it out. I mean, lay it out across the board, because people are not going to be the same. They're not the same now, and they're not going to be the same a year from now. So I definitely appreciate all of that. That pretty much got what I wanted to ask a question. It was really weird because we're going through this situation dealing with him. Neither one of us really like to mention the guy's name, but Donald Trump, as a former public official, and hopefully he never becomes a public official again. In a situation like that, I think that when he was right there and they could have did the right thing, I don't know if maybe he didn't have a arrestable offense going for him, but it seems like they should have sunk their teeth in before he got out of office. It seems like it's going to be more difficult to do what they need to do the right thing. In your position as a prosecutor, when you have criminal behavior by an appointed official, elected official, or whatever, because you've been very open with some of the things, and I want to close out and just talk about some of the things that you have done in just your first 30 days virtually. But when you have an appointed official, an elected official, and you know they've committed a crime, do you see yourself, because you've been so open and would you say you're left? Would you say that you're just totally left? You're definitely not centrist, but I mean, are you all the way left? Are you a liberal to the point where
I don't know what all the way left means.
Huh?
I don't know what all the way left means, but you know, certainly I'm progressive.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that everything that we are doing, it's not just like a theory. It's not just based on some ideology. We you can look up our policies, and I urge people to read them if you have questions, not just about what we're doing, but about why we're doing it.
Right.
Everything we're doing is backed in data and research. So,
right.
You know, I'm definitely progressive, and I campaigned as a progressive prosecutor. But it's not just a matter of ideology. Really, the stuff that we're doing is based in research and data and what's worked elsewhere.
It makes sense. And when you have people that have done wrong, I mean, in a perfect world, if you do wrong, if you break the law, you should be held accountable for it. But why do we see so many public officials, elected or appointed, go free based on, you know, is that the prosecutor who doesn't push? Is that, I mean, you know they committed a crime, but they somehow slide out. Is that something that you see yourself, because basically you're in the first term. You get a high-end public official who commits a crime in your first 4 years, it'd probably be a bad move politically if you chose to go all in and try to convict this person or try and convict this person. Would it not? I mean, or do you even care? I mean, what's wrong is wrong, and I'm gonna press charges. I mean, is that where you are with things?
Yeah, you know, I don't want to put too fine a point on this because of course I care about my reputation and everything like
Right.
that. I'm a politician, I guess. But all that is a preface to saying I really don't care. You know, I was elected to do a job. I believe that justice should treat people fairly and equitably, but ultimately that, you know, consequences should arise in the criminal legal system based not on who you are, but because of what you did. And
Right.
that means that I do not believe in trapping poor people in a system where they're perpetually being shuffled in and out of the justice system because of class, because of race, because of who they are. But it also means that if you do something that's serious and you deserve to be prosecuted, I don't care if you're a billionaire, I don't care if you're a public official. For far too long, we've had people basically be able to buy their way out of justice or try to influence their way out of justice. And I just, you know, I was elected to do the job. And if it's politically damaging, you know, I'm speaking hypotheticals here. Obviously,
Sure.
you know, police need to investigate. We need to get a report. That's how the system functions. But I'm not going to go and look and say, oh, well, gosh, that person is a powerful person in the community, and I don't want to potentially prosecute them. If they did something that's harming the community, they need to be held accountable. And you're right. You know, for far too long, you know, frankly, wealthy people are above the law. I'll give you an example, because one thing that I did in my previous job was I led, you know, I worked for the city of Detroit, and I led our lawsuit against the opioid companies, big billion-dollar industries. You want to talk about drug cartels? You really want to talk about drug cartels? The biggest drug cartels were sitting up with nice suits in New York City at corporate boardrooms. And they caused so much harm and so much death in our communities. And it was just the cost of doing business to them.
Right.
So to my mind, they shouldn't be above the law.
Right.
And that's sort of how I view it.
And your money, your influence, you know, the people get into high places like that, they tend to know high-end law enforcement people, you know, so it's that person, even if he does sit in jail, he's probably not being treated like the other inmates. He's brought some special circumstances. I think everybody needs to walk that same path. If they commit a crime, they need to walk that same path. And then, you know, I hear a lot about like special investigative units where they kind of have to take it out of the police hands and bring in a totally different agency because they corrupt or they may be influenced by the person that's being accused of a crime. Washtenaw County is not really known for stuff like that, but I'm sure at some point, if your tenure is anywhere, you know, near the length of the former prosecutor, you're going to come into those situations. That's one thing that I do like, and I've told people, I'm like, I don't think he can be compromised like that. He doesn't, and you just said it, I don't care. If you commit the crime and there's certain things that we need to do, we got to do our job. You were elected to do a job. You weren't elected to be pushed around by influencers, you know, and I think that some people get caught up in the politics of it all, and that's what happens. You know, looking at the thing, you know, I'm really right on your site right now about sex workers and the mushrooms and things like that. Some things that just made sense not to prosecute. They probably should have been prosecuted for years. But the type of month that you did have, knowing that you had that type of January, you can't keep dropping bombs like this every month. I mean, you know, you can't keep dropping bombs like this every month. But I think what this does is this starts to separate you from the old regime, because that's what people were looking at. Like, what's going to be different with this guy? It's like, he's going to make sense. You just have to listen to him. You have to understand. But, you know, we talked a little bit at the beginning. Just briefly talk why you're not going to prosecute the sex worker per se versus, you know, I just need to have that aired because some people really don't understand. And, you know, all the sarcasm aside, talk about why that's not something that even should be looked at as a crime, but what you should be looking at is the deeper rooted situation.
Right. And so I want to make something very clear at the outset. When we say we are not prosecuting sex work per se, we're not prosecuting the consensual exchange of sex for money. That does not mean we're not going after human traffickers. It does not mean we're not going after predatory pimps. It does not mean that we're not going to prosecute cases of sexual assault or physical assault that may be perpetrated by somebody against a sex worker. And it does not mean that we're not going to prosecute people who seek to purchase sex from minors, from children. All of those are very serious crimes, and those are my priority. Saying very publicly, and I realize it was controversial and you caused people to look at it, but saying very publicly that we are not going to prosecute sex workers makes it a lot easier for us to root out that type of crime. The reason for that is really simple. If you are a sex worker, right, and you are the victim of trafficking, you are the victim of a sexual assault, you are the victim of a physical assault, you know of somebody that is trafficking a teenager. If you fear that your local prosecutor is going to prosecute you because of your choice to engage in sex work, you are not going to go to the police and report any of that.
Right.
It's not. Why would you? You fear that you're going to turn around and be prosecuted. So we said very clearly, we want you to know you don't have anything to fear from us. Report the traffickers, report the people that are trying to engage in sex with minors, report the sexual assault or the physical assault that you or somebody you know may be a victim of. That's what's going to keep us safe. We're not going to turn around and prosecute you because you reported a very serious crime. How does that make any sense at all? But there's other reasons for this too. Number one, people say, well, you know, aren't you encouraging this? You know, if you say you're not going to prosecute sex workers, aren't you just going to create more of a market for it? The answer is no. First of all, we know that because over 100 countries have legalized sex work in one way or another, and you haven't seen a rise in people engaging in sex work. The choice to engage in sex work is not based on whether a local prosecutor says they're going to prosecute you or not. It's not like everybody now is saying, well, gosh, I'm going to engage in sex work, right? The other thing is, how many times do we have to learn this lesson? We tried prohibition of alcohol. We tried prohibition of drugs. Right? And we did not get rid of people's desire to drink, people's desire to use drugs. What we did do through prohibition was we increased the violence and the danger and the coercion that went along with those industries. You had gangsters in the 1920s that were in control of the alcohol industry, and people died because of it. The war on drugs, we tried so hard, and what we ended up doing was creating cartels and having people lose their lives due to violence associated with the drug trade. And now people are using drugs more than ever. It's been a failure. Prohibitionist policies don't work. What they do is they make that transaction much more dangerous. Beyond that, this is about providing leverage to sex workers to avoid the spread of disease. I listen to doctors and I listen to medical research. If a sex worker fears prosecution, right? If the act is illegal, the sex worker is going to be less able and have less leverage to insist on condom usage during the transaction than the sex worker would have been otherwise, because the whole activity is illegal. So the leading independent medical journal in the world, I'm not kidding, the leading one, did a series of research papers, and they said, you know what the best thing that the world can do to stop the spread of HIV is to decriminalize sex work, because then you give them the leverage to engage in what they're going to be engaging in anyway in a much safer way. And the final point that I'll emphasize is this: for many people, the choice to engage in sex work is one born out of necessity. People aren't thinking about what the prosecutor's doing or the position paper the prosecutor released. They're doing it to feed their family. They're doing it because they have no other options. Not all sex workers, but some, right? If we really want to prevent that, first of all, let's focus on resources. Let's focus on making sure that people don't face that desperation, but also let's not criminalize that act, because once you criminalize a sex worker who may prefer to leave the industry, they may be doing it for what they hope is a short period of time. But now, going back to our earlier discussion, now, if you criminalized it, you've saddled them with a criminal record, you've saddled them with court involvement, they've got a record, and it's less likely that they're going to be able to get a job that's not in the sex work industry. So you trap them there because, ironically, of this desire to encourage people to avoid sex work in the first place. You end up trapping them there. So all of this is based on data, on research, and at the end of the day, based on my decision that we really want to fight trafficking and sexual assault and physical assault and people that try to buy sex from minors. This will make it much more easy to go after those bad guys, the folks that are really harming the community and are forcing people to engage in sex work against their will. That's what we should be going after. We shouldn't just be prosecuting the simple exchange of sex for money. It is counterproductive to everything we hope to achieve.
Right. And in Washtenaw County, I mean, you know, a lot of people don't think that this runs rampant, but it does. It runs rampant. It's in Ann Arbor. One of the things that you'll find is it's a trickle down effect, because if she's not just out there, and we're speaking that mostly these are women, but there's men that are sex workers as well. But that individual they're not just out there sometimes just because they need to make income. They're out there because they're addicted to narcotics, and this feeds their habit, and that's another way for them not to get away. So then we talked about it, predatory pimping.
Yes,
that pimp feeds them the dope, so they go out there and have sex for money, and it's just a circular effect. Who needs to be getting in trouble is the person who's giving that person the dope or withholding the dope until you go out there and have the sex. And people don't understand. It's way deeper than the person that's laying on their back. It's way deeper than that. So you have to start to cut off the head of the monster. Because that person right there, if you get them some rehab, some time down, some rehab, and then put them in a suitable situation where they can go to work and not feel as though that they're the prey, they're going to be much more likely to be successful out here. Sometimes it's really just getting away from that individual. Getting them away from an individual, because that one person can keep you held down, whether it be in a hotel room, some type of flop house somewhere. Hell, there's males, I don't call them men, there's males driving women around in cars, and they're having sex in the back seat of a car. Don't arrest her, arrest the person that's driving her around and forcing her to do it, because he won't get her a hit of dope unless she does do it. And whatever that hit of dope is going to take care of her for the next 20, 30 minutes. She's going to be fiending again. She's going to need to do the act again. She's not the criminal here. She's the prey. Get the criminal, get the driver. And that's what I don't think we look at. And the judge sometimes, these court systems sometimes, I think they just throw the baby away with the bathwater and just say, well, everybody. No, it's not everybody. There's a reason why she was there. And, it's unfortunate because they don't go back in those ladies' history or some of those young men's histories. Some of these people were honor students. Some of these people were destined for college if they weren't in college. Some of these people were professional people before they jumped into that life because they lost it for one reason or another. And the only thing that kept them down was the drug. And then they just found a creative way to make their ends meet getting that drug. And it was giving up their body. So I commend
and I'm glad you mentioned that because that is a much better exposition of what actually happens with trafficking and with predatory pimping than I think most people realize. But let's take your example. And we have people, and by the way, we're prosecuting people that meet exactly the criteria that you mentioned. We're still prosecuting them. These are cases currently pending. So nothing in my policy said that we're not going after predatory pimps. We absolutely are. But let's say you're a sex worker and because you run across a fellow sex worker that is being trafficked by somebody that's giving them hits of drugs in this situation. And you think to yourself, that is wrong. That is screwed up. I really want to get that person help. If you fear that making a report on that predatory pimp is going to lead to your prosecution, because the police are going to ask, well, how do you know about this, right? And you may say, well, you know, we're both engaged in sex work, and I had a conversation with her. If you fear that they're going to turn around and say, you're engaged in sex work, I'm going to arrest you, why would you ever report that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They have that thing, what is this? If you see something, say something. Well, most people are scared to say something if they see something, because you're going to arrest them too.
Right, exactly.
Here. You know, and it's just like, nobody wants to be a part of that situation. I'm sitting here trying to help someone, then you end up taking me down for being helpful. And that's not being a snitch, you know, and I know we're in that culture, that no snitch culture. That's not being a snitch. You're not trying to tell on this person because they're being preyed upon. You're trying to get them out. You know, you're not under that system. You know, you might be, you know, a renegade, you know, what they called them back in the day. You might be a renegade. You don't have a pimp. That pimp is not healthy for her. So you want to get her out from up under that pimp. So you pull her out. He goes to jail. She gets help, and everybody's everybody. You still may be living your life. But if you think that the cop is going to possibly arrest you, in some situations, the police officers become predatory themselves. You know, to keep from getting arrested, I might need you to do a little something. And these girls will shy away from that. Yeah. They shy away from that because they're not trying to take on that responsibility now, because now he's got you. Every time he sees you, either he busts you, or you got to do what he needs you to do. So those types of situations happen. And, you know, we got to be able to just put the right people in the right places. And hopefully there's funding for that. Obviously there's adequate funding for that, because when you take one of these young ladies off the street, you can't just throw them somewhere where they can get right back out. You got to put them somewhere where they can instantly get help, you know, and they got to be talking to a social worker and this, that, and the other, and getting them aligned the right way. Because if you just put them, I don't know, the Ronald McDonald House or wherever, somewhere where they might just walk right back out there, you can't do it. You know, you got to put them in a place where they can actually truly get some help and be able to excel. And it kind of segues to with, you know, we already know about where cannabis is. But cannabis is still a weird situation, because they're still listing cannabis as a Schedule 1, Schedule 2.
Yeah.
It's not legal then, if it's still a Schedule 1, Schedule 2. How did we get to the point? Because I was out there. I beat the pavement for a couple of years, petitions and protests and this, that, and the other. What did we do to get it legalized if we're still getting people charged with Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 offenses? What did we do there?
So marijuana and cannabis is legal for recreational use at the state level. It remains a Schedule 1 drug at the federal level, which means that it is, you know, marijuana-related crimes recreationally are still federal violations. Now, functionally, the truth of the matter is it's been a while since the federal government really cared about marijuana, and the U.S. Attorney's Office has really cared about marijuana. They're just not interested in it anymore, because first of all, a lot of people do it. Frankly, I you know, I would bet you that many of the assistant U.S. attorneys have at one point or another dabbled in marijuana, right? So it's just not something that is a high priority for them. And so when states legalize it, the federal government effectively bows out and says, okay, you know, we're going to respect that state's decision, and we're not going to just fill the gaps and go after all of the marijuana related crimes that are no longer crimes under state law. And the truth of the matter is, it's always been state level prosecutions for most marijuana offenses. The feds try to take the big, really dangerous stuff, appropriately so. They have limited resources.
Sure.
I will say that there are some real concerns still with marijuana being legalized at a state level and being illegal still at a federal level. One of which is that it's really hard to open a bank account if you're a marijuana entrepreneur that's legal under state law, right? Because banks are federally regulated, and they don't want to be, you know, engaged in allowing bank accounts when they know the proceeds are a result of a Schedule 1 drug.
Right.
So that, by the way, encourages people to sell in cash, which is totally legal, obviously, but then you got a situation where you got a bunch of cash, and that can lead to violence and stick-ups and the like. So there's a lot of real oddities. And the truth of the matter is, it's, you know, marijuana legalization is not just the right thing to do, it's the popular thing to do.
Sure.
You look at every time this goes on the ballot in a state, it doesn't matter if it's a red state, blue state, deep red state, marijuana is going to get legalized if you put it to the voters. And so what I'm hopeful is there's been legislation introduced to finally legalize marijuana at the federal level. It's far past time to do that. You know, if you're having something be a crime that probably half of the U.S. population has done, at some point you just got to admit the criminalization has failed, and get on with it already.
And do you think it has anything to do with the fact that the United States government holds the patent to THC and CBD? I mean, their main thing is always going to be to get the money first. The government is going to get the money. Is it why they haven't made it federally legal? Because they're still trying to squeeze every nickel that they can out of this plant? I mean, I smoke hemp a lot because I couldn't smoke cannabis as much as I smoke. I smoke not for the neurological high. I smoke really for the body healing. You know, crazy thing for me is I've lost over 200 pounds through bariatrics, and it's tough to maintain it. But one of the things that I never did outside of the hospital, I didn't take morphine. I wouldn't take Norcos, hydrocodone. I didn't want it. And I knew that cannabis could help me. And I wasn't even up on hemp back in 2013 when I had my surgery. And I didn't understand it as much. Then I started cooking with cannabis and started understanding, you know, what hemp is based on, you know, its medicinal values, and then what cannabis is. I make a lot of videos in my car, and I drive, and I have hemp. And I know hemp is 100% legal in the United States, but it still got me blocked on Facebook because they said it was against their community guidelines. But then requested friendship all the time by people that are holding up bales of cannabis. And it's really weird to me. It's like, you know, what are they really checking for out here? Do they want you not to glorify the fact that, I mean, it's hemp, but they said because it's a derivative of marijuana, it's still federally Schedule I, Schedule II drug. And they were taking suburban moms down in Georgia a couple of years ago. They were taking them to jail, trying to get Rick Simpson oil, basically made from hemp and made from cannabis, for their kids who had epilepsy and were you know, having all types of different seizures and stuff like that. These women then learned how to make the stuff themselves. They started growing marijuana themselves. These are suburban Atlanta women, you know, white women. It's crazy to me. It's like you put somebody through a stretch like that, and it's not that I empathize with them any more than the man that you put behind bars for 30 years for having a joint in his pocket. But it's kind of not making sense anymore, you know, and they know the medicinal values behind it. Hell, I'm seeing floated every day now that they think cannabis has the qualities to prevent COVID or help with deflecting COVID because of all of its medicinal qualities. I said it from the beginning, and I haven't been sick, thankfully. I haven't been sick, but it builds up your immune system in such a way if you do mix hemp and cannabis. I don't think that I'm Teflon, but I know I'm healthier than anybody else out here taking pills. You know, even if you put another guy that's right next to me, about 320, I'm about 322 now, put another 322 pounder who drinks alcohol and takes pills versus somebody who doesn't drink alcohol and who smokes cannabis and hemp and eats cannabis, whatever. I'm in better shape than he is. You know, you do a full body examination, I'm in a better way than he is. And I'm not sure exactly why the government hasn't just said, you know what, why don't we just do away with this and totally decriminalize it, take it off the Schedule I, Schedule II list, and let people live their lives. Because we, like you said, we know a lot of people in government, you know, use cannabis. They may not They may not be twisting joints, but they're doing something else, you know.
Yeah. And if they don't now, then they probably did
Exactly
in the past. You know, if you want to look at your big your big weed stash houses in Washtenaw County, you know, all you got to do is go down to any college living situation or a frat house or something like that, and you know, those kids are going to be fine.
Yeah, they'll be fine. They'll definitely be fine. The other thing that you did, it had to do with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the legislation that you're passing now, and like I said, you're not letting the jailhouse open, you're not letting the juvenile facilities open, but you're making things make sense where crimes go. I'm just getting back to it here. Hold on one second. I definitely want to talk about racial profile. I want to close with that. But, you know, children and teenagers are not small adults. And that's the way they've been treated. You know, that's just flat out the way they've been treated. When you do something malicious, I get it. You know, they just had a 15 and a 16-year-old who checked out a Uber driver in Detroit. They're 15 and 16. They tried them as adults. I don't know exactly what that means in the grand scheme of things. Do they go right to an adult facility, or do they go to a juvenile facility till they're 18? Then they go to an adult facility, but they've already charged them as adults. They may deserve to be charged as adults. I get it. But the legislation that you put forth about the involvement of children, can you just kind of open that up? Because got a lot of friends. I was a coach for many, many years. And now a lot of those people who I may have coached their kids, some of them have grandkids are now coming up in the situation. Then I also know people that are still, you know, they still have teenagers that are dealing with some situations. What exactly did you do with this legislation dealing with small children and teenagers dealing with the judicial system?
Yeah, so what we said is look, there are things that kids are going to do, that teenagers are going to do, that don't warrant the involvement of the criminal legal system, right? They just don't. Look, I used to be an 8th grade history teacher. I taught at a public school. I taught special education, general education classes. I love 8th graders. Really, I do. I'm one of the people that just like, I think they're funny. I think they're bright. I love teaching them. They're also stupid sometimes. They just do dumb things. And I'm not saying that, like, I did dumb things when I was in 8th grade. And
right.
I grew up in Washtenaw County.
Right.
I got the benefit of the doubt. And let's be real, it's in part because of what I look like, right? The color of my skin. I always get the benefit of the doubt.
Sure.
And none of the stupid mistakes that could have been charged, could have been crimes, none of that ever got in the way of me moving on with my life. And I grew out of it, and kids grow out of it most of the time. Now, obviously, if you're shooting at somebody, you know, if you're 16 years old, that's a totally different situation.
Right.
You're doing an armed robbery, you're breaking into people's houses, that's different.
Right.
But what we said is, look, things like running away from home, right? Curfew violations, being disorderly on the street or whatever, those aren't things that the criminal justice system should be dealing with. The other types of things that they shouldn't be dealing with is these sort of minor, low-level offenses that take place either in school or like right off school grounds with your classmates. You get in a hallway fight, kids have been getting in hallway fights for time immemorial, right? That is not something that needs to be dealt with through the criminal legal system in most circumstances. It can be dealt with at the school level. It can be dealt with at home. Now, obviously, if you know and we have examples in the policy, if you pick up a baseball bat and you smash somebody in the head with it in school, that's
right.
very different. That goes well beyond what's typical adolescent misbehavior.
Right.
But so what we're saying is we're just not charging this anymore. If you run away from home, you probably need some sort of intervention. You know, maybe there's an issue going on at home. Maybe you're, you know, dealing with a mental health or a substance use issue, but it's not a criminal matter. If you do stupid stuff in school, the school can deal with it most of the time. And this isn't just about being kinder to kids. Or more fair to kids and more cognizant of adolescent brain development. It's also about keeping us safe. Because again, you know, I'll go back to this. Everything we're doing is backed in the data and the research. Right. And there was a decades-long economic study that showed definitively that sending a kid to the juvenile detention center makes it more likely they're going to commit future crimes than if you just did nothing.
Right.
And the reason for that is because of what we were talking about earlier too, right? You send
Jail birthism, jail births criminals. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you send a kid, and kids are socially connected human beings, right? Adolescents are hardwired to seek social connections. You take a kid away from their home environment, away from their school environment, you put them in a juvenile detention center with other kids that have gotten in trouble, they're going to build social connections with those kids, right? And that, by the way, is how you get a worsening gang problem, because they're birthed in juvenile detention centers because you're just so hardwired to seek social connections. And who are you seeking social connections with? Maybe somebody that's in there for a more serious offense. So I'm not saying we're never going to charge kids, but this low level stuff, it shouldn't be dealt with in the criminal legal system or a juvenile justice system. It's just far better addressed through other mechanisms, either through, services or, discipline that's imposed by the school or at home. And the truth of the matter is most kids are going to grow out of it no matter what we do. We should be avoiding making things worse. And we should also be avoiding disrupting a kid's life in a way that can totally alter their life trajectory if they get caught up in the criminal legal system.
Right. And I guess the biggest thing for me when I listen to you, things make sense. But what I also do, and I invite other people to do, read the policies. Everybody reads the caption.
Yeah.
Hit me up like, man, did you see what he just did? I'm like, look, man, read the policy. Because I read the caption and I'm like, what the fuck? But I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it because if I don't read it, then I'm just as bad as that next person that's, claiming. And then you get 5 or 6 people, they're talking about something that's just not in the bill. And I mean, I grew up in an age where I watched Scared Straight on Saturday nights, the real Scared Straight. It was like they had cussing on TV and these were real prisoners. It wasn't all this stuff that they put on now. These guys are in jail, but they got a lot of actors and the kids know that nothing's going to happen to them. But I watched Scared Straight. It was crazy. But my grandmother also took me to the county. She took me to Milan. She took me to Jackson, all where people she knew were prisoners. Mm-hmm. The crazy thing was she had a neighbor who was 2 doors down from her. She lived on Gott Street. 2 doors down from her went to prison. I knew this man. I saw this man every weekend I came to my grandmother's house. Then all of a sudden, he went to prison. So we're visiting him in prison. So I just knew him. I never thought any different of him. But when you see things now, it's just like for kids to go to a juvenile facility, when they come out, they all think they're Tony Montana. They think they're Nino Brown. They think, because they're believing the life that's going on inside. And they think they can actually improve on what got them there the first time. Oh, this is how I won't get caught. No, you're just going to get caught faster. And nobody's there. That all falls back to mental health. I don't think being incarcerated is a rehabilitation facility. And that's a part of what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be rehabbing a criminal. And a lot of times they're just in there doing the days. They're just in there doing the days. And when you spin them out and they didn't learn anything but to become a much better criminal, you'll see them in a couple years or maybe less. So those things make sense to me. What we've had go on in Washtenaw County with racial profiling all my life, I've learned that this gray has helped me now because they're less likely to mess with somebody that looks like me versus to mess with somebody that's a little younger. Now, frankly, I drive a vehicle. They can't tell what I am until I roll my windows down, but they don't even mess with me about tinted windows anymore. I remember we used to get stopped all the time for having tinted windows. It never made sense to me why you need to be able to see inside my vehicle if I'm not doing anything illegal. So I've always been able to fight out of that ticket. But now they don't mess with you about that stuff. But the racial profiling things that you've put forth, these are just make sense things. Why did it take so long? I mean, why was it not something? Because I know people that just got their blood back from the Irvin Mitchell case. They just got their blood back over the last couple of years. Urban Mitchell's been in jail at least 20 years now. Yeah. And Washtenaw County held on to their blood, part of this last regime. And I don't know if he was the prosecutor then. I don't know if he prosecuted Urban, if it was the one right before him.
He was.
But he was. Okay. So I got stopped with a buddy of mine. I'm 5'9", he's about 5'9", 5'10". Urban Mitchell was 6'7". When we stepped out of the car, you knew the suspect, and every woman that said she had been raped said she'd been raped by a tall man. God forbid I'd ever be called a tall man. Yeah, my ego would go crazy, but I'm 5'9", bro. Why are you messing with me? That was racial profiling. And it literally happened right in Maine and Huron. We stopped right by the courthouse, right at the southeast door, the main door there, southwest door. We were in a Chevette. We got out of that car, we're barely taller than the damn hoods or the roof. But they gave us all types of shit, cuffs us, sat us on the curb, went through the car. And it was all about Urban Mitchell. But it really wasn't. It was about because we were two black guys driving around in a Chevette. And what the hell are you doing that for? So why did it take so long for racial profiling legislation to come forth? And supposedly one of the most liberal areas, one of the most liberal towns in the union. Why did it take so long for us to get here?
You know, I think that even among folks who consider themselves progressive, for a long time, there was not really any sense of the need to do things differently in the criminal justice system. There just wasn't. It was sort of this exception to all other progressive values. And you could see this because, you know, the only way that you could run and win a county prosecutor race or a district attorney's race, and I'm talking about across the country now, right? States attorneys, whatever they call them in the other countries, or in other states, you know, is to say, I'm going to be tough on crime. I'm going to be, you know, really steadfast, just going after the criminals and whatever we need to do to get that. You know, you look at stop and frisk in New York City, very democratic city, right? Very progressive city, but stop and frisk was very popular there, right? Politicians ran on defending it. And it's not really been until the last 5 or 6 years, if I'm being honest, and there's sort of, I think, seminal moments that have led us to this point, that you've seen, even in progressive jurisdictions, a real awakening as to the ways in which the criminal legal system has perpetuated racial inequity and has perpetuated real harm. I think, you know, one thing that at least was a real sea change moment for sort of policymakers is the publication of Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. You know, I think that just forcefully made the case that we have recreated through our criminal legal system a Jim Crow system across the country, because you got a system in which Black people are 6 times as likely as white people to serve time in prison in a country that incarcerates more people than any nation on the planet. And then you have a felony conviction, you can't get a job, you can't get housing, you can't get education. You've created the exact same segregated society through the criminal legal system as Jim Crow did formally after the Civil War. You just
can't even protect your family if you die. If you die committing a crime, you can't even protect your family because you can't get life insurance. As a convicted felon, they won't allow insurance companies to bind coverage. So it's just like, you're damned if you do, damned if you're dead.
Yeah.
Those things had to come to pass. And I'm hoping that Washtenaw County is going to be a groundbreaking situation, obviously, where it's going to change things. But it's got to get this way around the country. People are going to jail. They're being arrested for things, or just being stopped, racially profiled, just being stopped. I mean, we had people, I grew up in this way. Always keep your car clean. You know, if your car is dirty, you're more likely to get stopped if you're Black. Why does the cleanliness of my car matter? We went through the generation, I'm a little bit older than you. Well, I'm a whole lot older than you. Remember the little Crown air fresheners that people would put in the back window?
Yeah.
It would stop people with those, one, supposedly it was a symbol for gang activity, and two, it was obstructing your view. But then somebody could have something huge hanging from their rear view mirror, and you don't. Fuzzy dice were the biggest thing probably in creation to ever hang from a rear view mirror. But you don't stop people with fuzzy dice, but you stop me with the Crown air freshener in the back window. They just figured out different ways to stop you. And I always tell people, look, if they stop you and you know you haven't done anything, they're looking for something. So you just have to make sure, one, make sure your paperwork's right. Two, make sure you're not doing anything stupid in your car, because when they do come up and you give them PC, they're going to go through your car. Now, I've been stopped once, crazily moving, having him. I explained the situation to the officer. He was just like, this really kind of confused me because I never heard of him. And I was like, well, hold on. And I was like, I'm gonna reach up, and I have a piece of paper in my sun visor that tells where the hemp was grown. It was tested by the state, and he's looking at it, and he's like, really? And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, you see the THC level, 0.3%? I was like, I can smoke 10 of these and I'm not getting high. And he's like, wow. And I also, crazy thing on daylight savings time, not last year, not this past year, but year before last, I fell asleep in the Burger King drive-through because of daylight saving. I lost that hour. So, we fell back. So I figured I'd stop by Burger King, grab me something to eat. It was really 3 o'clock or right before 3 o'clock, but we flipped it back. I left Roundtree Bar, well, no, it's now McShane's. Dude, I ordered my food, fell asleep between the microphone and the window. I get awakened by a Pittsfield cop, a younger guy and an older guy. Rolled my window down. He was like, you okay? I was like, yeah. And I was like, I fell asleep. And he was like, yeah, the worker said, they went through the whole progression. And he's like, can you just pull over for me? I was like, sure, no problem. And then when I pulled over, I rolled my window back down. He was like, I have to tell you, when I pulled up on you, I could smell cannabis. And I was like, when I explained myself, I was like, I hadn't smoked anything. I just went from the bar to the Burger King. I was like, I hadn't smoked anything. And he's like, well, when's the last time you think you smoked some cannabis? And I was like, it's been probably 3 or 4 hours. I've been at the bar. He was like, oh, okay, no problem. He's like, do you have anything to drink? I told him I had a drink. Now it's the young guy. The old man is leaning up against the car because he already knows this is going to be a nothing burger. He was just like, you did admit that you had a drink, but so I'm going to do a breathalyzer, did all this stuff. But I had already told him, I was just like, I do have cannabis in the car. I was like, in the back, there's a couple boxes that have edibles in them. I explained everything. And we went through the whole progression. Somebody rolled up, I still to this day, because they've never come forward, and said, hey, homie, you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm good. Because I felt I was okay. I was on Washtenaw. This is my town. I'm okay. But it just let me know that handling myself then, I felt good about it. But I don't know if it would have happened 15 years ago. I don't know how that stop would have went 15 years ago. I could have responded differently, but because of my confidence of who I am and what I'm dealing with on a daily basis with cannabis and hemp, I felt totally confident. But I don't see that going the same way for people and haven't seen it go the same way. So having this racial profiling legislation come forth, you're basically saying like, it's been fucked up out here. And we gotta change some things. And we just never had that. So when you start pushing legislation like this, people all of a sudden think like, okay, there's gotta be a hitch to it. I'm like, yeah, don't commit crimes. But if you read the legislation and why they're actually doing this, we already know the stats. We already know people that have been stopped because they were Black, but look at why they're doing it and look at what they're going to prevent by enhancing this type of program. We've needed that new energy. We've needed that new energy across the board, and we weren't gonna have it if the things that kept happening and that person kept going and been the prosecutor, or you brought somebody else in who thought like him. We weren't going to have those type of changes. So I definitely commend you on those types of things. I commend your office on those types of things, but I know you're not doing this by yourself. I know all of these ideologies aren't Ellie's. What does it take for you as a prosecutor to have people come in? Do you round table this thing? Are you prosecuting by committee type of thing? I mean, how are you getting to such groundbreaking things in the first 30 days? you know.
Well, yeah. So a couple of things. First of all, even starting my campaign, didn't start the campaign by myself. And it ended up being an open seat, but I got in the race intending to challenge Brian Mackey because folks have been looking for a opponent for him for a while, and I had some activists that sort of started conversations with me. They thought you civil rights lawyer, you'd be pretty good. And I thought about it. I said, well, here's what I believe, and here's what I'll run on. I'll run on that. But if you want somebody that's just like a little bit better on these issues than the current prosecutor, I'm not really about that. I don't need to be a prosecutor.
Right.
And I've got a view of the criminal legal system that I've seen through my practice, and here's what I'm going to run on. And then we had conversations, and I heard stories, and we sat and we listened. We sort of planned out a campaign together. So that's how I started. It really started in conversation with the community. But then the other thing is after I won, and I ran on all the stuff that I'm doing now. Nothing that I've put out or our office has put out should really come as a surprise to people that followed the campaign, because all of it was what I promised I would do. But there comes a time where the campaign promises that you make, you've actually got to put them into action. And so, we won the primary election, and we didn't have a general election opponent. So I was done campaigning after August. And we assembled a dozen working groups, a dozen community working groups to craft these policies together. And we reached out to folks, and folks volunteered, and we had representation from law enforcement. We had representation from defense lawyers, prosecutors, neighborhood leaders, faith leaders, community activists, educators, mental health professionals, substance use professionals, all of it. And we met, every single one of those groups met every 2 weeks from basically August through January 1st when I got into office. And I wrote the policies, and they went through editing processes, and people provided their feedback. They raised issues that I hadn't thought about. It came with knowledge, either on the ground knowledge from just being a neighborhood leader, or you're looking at a substance use policy. You had doctors in the room explaining, okay, here's actually how the science of this particular drug work. And it was a great experience because, at the end of the day, we had a lot of conversations, and people came through it, came to that work from different perspectives. But we were all really sort of seeking the same thing, which was a better justice system. And we had conversations, and we came up with the documents that we did after sort of taking stock of everybody's feedback. And I'm really grateful to the community for really stepping up and putting that effort. I mean, nobody was getting paid for this. It was all volunteers, all people that just feel passionately about their community. And so, I know it seemed like in January, people were like, where are you finding the time to write all these things? Boy, you're just going rapid fire one after another. But really, those documents, those policies, there was a lot of thought and a lot of collaboration put into them. And they were the product of months of work after the election, after the primary election in August, and really years of work dating back to the first conversations I had with the community before I was even thinking about running.
And to me, that kind of sums things up, because you basically used everybody in your village. People that you were connected to. I think that's the only way this thing really gets turned around. This thing being America. It's going to have all hands on deck. It can't just be one set of individuals all the time creating policies for everybody else, because you can't create a policy for me if you don't really know how I live or what I've been through. And I think politics has been, for hundreds of years, repainting of the walls, when in fact we needed to knock the motherfucking walls down. We didn't need the walls, because the village could be the walls. I mean, what's the saying? Jesus be a fence around me. I mean, my fence is my village. I'm protected by people around me. I'm not protected. I feel like this: if I have to carry a weapon in Washtenaw County, I didn't do my job for my almost 51 years being here. And I know I've left for a little bit and gone and lived in Wayne County for several years, but I can walk any street in Washtenaw County and not feel threatened, because I didn't turn anybody, because I didn't do anybody wrong, and I've done more good for more people than I could ever think about doing bad. As a prosecutor, people think that your job is just to put people in jail. No, your job is to pursue justice, you know, and we talk a lot about the criminal activity, but we don't talk as much about the victims and what happens on the other side of you being a prosecuting attorney. Sometimes that gets lost in the sauce. And when I had that long discussion, it was a beautiful discussion with Lorraine, we really got into talking about the victims. Because when you go to court, it's all about what this person did, what this person did, what this person did. This person over here is the person that got done in. What about this person here? And nobody ever thinks about that. And that's the way this justice system really works. I mean, this person needs to be rightfully punished. This person also needs to be rightfully consoled and taken care of, you know, in the after effect. And you're seeing that, you know, you're saying that with your policies that you're putting forth. I mean, like I said, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you follow it up after January, how you do it in February, or if you take a month off and you come back with some bombshells in March. I don't know how you're going to do it, but I just like the fact that you're utilizing people, you know, who can help you. We're already seeking a conversation, you know, with Victoria, because she comes from a whole nother path. She's right there next to you. That's your right hand. But she's going to come from a whole different point of view. And that's what makes you a great team. And anybody that's on your staff, you don't need two people of the same, because they cancel each other out. You need everybody, what makes up the pie. You need everybody to be different and be able to bring everything that they bring to the table to make all this work. And I don't think a lot of people see that. I mean, the way I looked at it, it was Brian Mackey and everybody else. I don't even know who his assistant prosecutor was for years. I mean, I already know. And she's already made a name for herself, you know, in her run for Wayne County prosecutor. And as we talked about in the first discussion we had, their L, you know, their L was our W, you know, I mean, and that's what it's all about to me. They took a L by putting Worthy back in the office. We're good with that now because we got her here, you know, and she's going to help reshape the prosecutor's office, which is what we need, and to bring things forth with her ideologies and everybody else that you have in tow. So that's going to be just something. And I think also too, just being from Ann Arbor and really this being your town helps us a lot, just to know that, hey, he came back home. He could have went to Washington, D.C. You know, you could have took a fat job in D.C. and God knows there's going to be a lot of people looking for lawyers here over the next several years, but you didn't. You came back home. You went to Detroit. You worked in Detroit, civil rights lawyer. I mean, and that's thankless work in a lot of ways. But what made you choose home? What made you choose Washtenaw over Washington?
You know, it's as simple as that. It is home for me. And, you know, I graduated law school and I had some opportunities to work in DC. And, you know, I tremendously fortunate to work for the late Justice Ginsburg on the U.S. Supreme Court. And after that, I was sort of at a fork in my career, and I had job offers from, you know, your fancy law firms in Washington, D.C. And I sort of had to make a choice. Do I want to be in Washington? Do I want to be a DC lawyer? Or do I want to come home? Do I want to be back in Michigan? And for me, you know, it was an easy choice. Long term, I saw myself being in the community that I grew up in, the state that I grew up in. I wanted to do public service. And, you know, so I made the decision to just come back home. And, you know, I entered public service at the city of Detroit. And, you know, when this opportunity arose, I've been living in Ann Arbor since I moved back. I really never thought that I'd be the Washtenaw County prosecutor. It was the furthest thing from my mind. But, you know, when I started having conversations with folks about running, it seemed like the right place and the right time for somebody with more of a civil rights and public interest background that knew this community, that loves this community, to really build a justice system that we can be proud of here. So, you know, it's where my heart is. It's always been where my heart is, and you know, I care deeply about this community and wanted to spend my life here. Didn't want to be in DC, didn't want to be one of those DC lawyers. So
right on. And we definitely appreciate that. At least for the first 30 days. I mean, you're batting 1,000 right now. You know, you might totally fuck up in February, Ellie. I don't know, but right now you're batting 1,000. But it's great to have this discussion. I cherish this discussion just like I cherished the first discussion. I had a little bit of an issue with the first discussion. Obviously, I couldn't record that stream. But then when I found out that you played basketball for Pioneer, you know, the interview almost went left, but I was able to maintain my professionalism. Then I had to go do some homework. And, hey, man, I'm sucking wind today because, you know, you guys did win a few games, you know, while you were at Pioneer. And playing with Lavelle, you know, we went back and forth a little bit. And tell Vel, you know, when you see him again, when you guys can play again. Shit, I know it was pretty.
I cannot wait for that.
Yeah, I mean, God, and it's yeah, him and his dad and my dad, they grew up together, and so I've known him since, you know, he wasn't here. But knowing that where Ann Arbor is now that we have the third high school, because I call them the third high school. I have no problem with calling Skyline the third high school. With Huron Pioneer Huron, I mean, I've always felt that if those two schools had combined, like a lot of schools did around the state and became a powerhouse, you know, but now you've got the third high school that's crept in and literally they made some real way a few years ago in basketball. It was kind of embarrassing for both Huron and Pioneer at that time because I think they ended up running the table the one year and ended up getting beaten in the quarters or whatever it was. And then Huron had a really good season last year, got cut off because of COVID. Pioneers obviously had their years. Where do you see all of this? Because I'm hearing about basketball practices. I'm hearing about them trying to squeeze 3 games in. Then I'm hearing about players wearing masks. Can you play basketball in a mask, Ellie?
You know, I've never tried it, and I haven't played basketball. I haven't played a good full court basketball game, obviously, since the pandemic started, which is the longest since first grade. And you know, I was telling somebody this the other day. As soon as this is over, I just can't wait to play some ball again. Like it's just, you know, it's honestly for me, it's like the one thing where that like actually clears my mind. You're not thinking about anything other than the game. So you know, I don't know about wearing masks. The one thing I am going to respond to is you said that Pioneer and Huron could have combined and formed this real powerhouse. At least in basketball, when I was a Pioneer, we didn't really need to combine with Huron to be a powerhouse. So I get why a river rat would propose.
Wi-Fi signal is screwing up, man. It's
but you know, we were pretty powerhouse just with Pioneer, and you know, but I actually feel you because I don't know what to do with Skyline. My deputy campaign manager, great guy, Ed Dance, young guy. He's going to make a lot of waves in the future. He's got a really bright political future. But he went to Skyline, and I didn't know how to banter with him about Skyline. It's like, you know, if he was a river rat, I could have said something. I'm just like, okay, whatever. Like,
what do you say to Skyline, man? What do you really say?
I don't know. Like, you know, the Eagles, fine. That's nice. I don't know. Whatever. So I lost.
I find myself being.
But Skyline, it's like, yeah, whatever.
You can't say anything bad about Skyline. Right. And their uniforms are powder blue. They're just automatically, it's pleasing to walk in. You know, the walls are nicely painted. It's not like you really walk in. I mean, I still, when you walk into Pioneer and it's about 30, 40 paces to get to the gym, there's so much energy, all the plaques and stuff on the wall. Huron's gotten reconfigured over the years. It's really weird. They've gotten rid of some of the trophies and it's strange, but there was always so much crazy energy going to Pioneer. When I was in school, we took pride in beating you guys. Now you guys did win. Now, were you on the state team or was that before or after you? Were you on the state?
So this is probably the biggest regret of my life.
Okay.
I was on JV sophomore year. And I did not get moved up to varsity for the state championship run, even though I was, you know, and again, this really does still irk me. I was the MVP of the JV team, so I was like the leading scorer, all that, you know, and usually that would get you a call to varsity.
Why didn't Brian move you up?
Because you know why? Because I was a rough player, you know, I had sharp elbows. And he was just like, and he told me, he took me aside and he was like, look, you know, you deserved it, you earned it. And I realize it's disappointing that you're not getting moved up, but I can't have you, you know, you could injure somebody in practice and could torpedo our state championship run. So don't worry, you know, next year is going to be your year. And it wasn't, and I had 2 good years on varsity, but so I was disappointed at the time, but then they go and win the damn state. And all of my JV teammates, like the 3 of them that got moved up, they got these nice rings and everything like that. And I was like, come on, man. And then we lost in the state quarterfinals my junior year. I really actually think my junior year, Lavelle was gone, but we had a squad that year. I think that team was better than the team that won the state championship.
Who was your point guard that year?
So point guard was Garrett Quinn, but we had Ryan Sidney was our player,
right?
And then Jake Bridgewater, also
Bridgewater.
Bridgewater was my year. We went to middle school together, and
Bridgewater had some ups.
He did well, and I think he transferred to Tappan in I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was 8th grade. It was 8th, 7th grade. And, you know, you're in middle school and he was just skying over kids. So we did have the best.
He had some ups.
I used to say we had definitely the best middle school basketball team because that Tappan Trojan team just destroyed everybody. We went 8-0 and, you know, because of Bridgewater. And we had, you know, I played college basketball. We had a couple other guys that played college basketball. So we had like 4 starters, I think, that ended up playing college basketball in a middle school team. So I used to say we were the best middle school team of all time. And then Amani Bates goes and plays at Clegg. And I can't say that anymore because I saw those highlights. It's just Amani Bates, who should, you know, could probably play in the NBA right now. And then these little like 5'3" kids are like,
it was embarrassing, dude.
Just,
scoring like 50 points and a half one game.
Right. So you know, whatever. So that Clegg team might be better.
That's crazy. But yesterday was my grandmother's birthday, and she worked about 26 years, I think it was, at Tappan. And she graduated before you got there. She graduated in 85. And Tappan has always been that school. I don't feel sorry. I was a road runner, so I went to Scarlet. I felt sorry for Tappan all the time because being right there in the middle, half your players went to Huron and half of them went to Pine.
Exactly.
So I've always felt bad for those guys because they never, if you could have just put them all in one place or to put them in the other place, those teams, once I said, if you put those 2 schools together back in the early 70s, I don't know if anybody would have won state championships in football and basketball because we would have created such a gelling of the 2 schools. Huron always had great athletes. Coaches sucked mostly. So they didn't know how to utilize the athletes. Pioneer always seemed like they had better coaching, and athletes were they were there, you know. And it was just so weird that if those 2 schools, I mean, obviously you're not thinking about this as a kid, but when I got up and as an adult and coaching and things like that, I just wanted them to merge the 2 schools. And then they birthed Skyline. Like, come on, dude, you know, a 3rd school, you know, it just didn't make any sense. And I just looked at that, but yeah, I just always felt like Huron and Pioneer should have been a powerhouse. But yeah, I always felt sorry for Tappan because they had to they splintered their talent. And I was in 87 on the 87 Huron football team. We blocked the field goal and ran it back at the end of the game. We had a lot of Tappan kids on our team and they played basketball. And I'm thinking, what if we didn't have those players and they had went to Pioneer? Might have not, you know, been able to do what we needed to do. Or what if the players who went to Tappan came to Huron? You know, it's just like, would that have put us over the hump? You know, now they eventually ended up going to the state championship in the weirdest scheme of things, but it was so weird to see how evenly the talent had gotten at that point. And now it's just with 3 schools, it's not the same. It's just not the same. Now they're actually making the rivalry. I think the rivalry is more Skyline Pioneer than it is for Huron Pioneer because hell, the football game isn't played at the end of the year, and these guys are all on the same side of town, so they're battling for bragging rights on the same side of town. So it leaves Huron just kind of off, you know. And last year, Huron,
it was so easy. It was so easy when we were in high school, right?
Yeah,
You had one crosstown rival, that Huron game. As a Pioneer kid, that was your game. I don't want to like split like
right.
Here's our other cross. It's like Michigan State, right?
Right.
You got one cross-state rival. That's it. You know.
That's it. You know, you can't make Central Michigan.
Yeah, exactly.
Able to, you know, it's just one or the other. But no, I appreciate you having this discussion tonight. One of the things that I'm doing, because I do believe that politics is about exchange, and I think people in the community like myself need to get out, and we need to talk to people like you. For so long, nobody wanted to talk to a prosecutor. Nobody wanted to be, you know, in that because if you were talking to a prosecutor, you were in trouble or you were trying to get out of trouble, and it shouldn't be like that. But since they've made it a political thing, I definitely believe that more people need to get involved like I am and doing even more, because we have people that are grassroots out here. I mean, you work with a lot of grassroots organizations, and the big thing for us to turn this around, like I said, we can't just repaint the walls. We got to knock the walls down. And in your first 30 days, you knocked a lot of walls down. And it didn't just mean just because you were the new prosecuting attorney. It meant because there's new energy. There's new energy in the room. There's new energy in the system. You know, looking at a Rain, newly elected judge, you know, you're a newly elected prosecutor. You know, we got Victoria in town. Chief Cox is still relatively new on the job, and I think he's starting to finally maybe dig his heels in. Hopefully we don't lose that man, but, you know, I know they kind of did him wrong when he first got here, but hopefully he's getting his footing, and I'm looking to talk to him at some point too. I think it's always a credit to where I see anybody go to the top of the food chain that looks like me. I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you because I want to find out how you got there and how can I get somebody else there. I'm too old to be going into policing, but I would love to see a junior police academy or some type of situation where if you have the inkling that you might want to go into law enforcement or into the legal system, let's create some programs that when these kids are in high school or even in junior high school and they're trying to figure out which way they're going to go in that fork in the road, let's put them in play. Let's not try to make them figure that out when they go to college, because that's way too much, because college is overwhelming enough. Let's have people kind of steering all, because that can also dictate which college you go to.
Yeah.
You know, you know, you might not want to go to Michigan because Michigan might not specialize in the profession you want to go into. It's great to stay at home. It's great to have that big block M on your back, but nobody really needs that if they're going into culinary arts. Go to the top culinary art school in the state or in the country and be the best. Nobody cares that you went to University of Michigan and became a great chef. But if you went to a culinary school that turns out great chefs and they teach you how to be a great chef, that's where you go. And, you know, it's a buddy of mine, Griff, he always says, you know, it's not about going where the shiniest helmet is. A lot of us go where the shiniest helmet or the brightest uniform. We don't need to do that anymore. We need to do what's best for us. And in politics is not about emotion. It's really not about being Democrat or Republican. It's about exchange. And if the Democrats are going to be the ones that are going to give you your exchange, you roll with the Democrats. The Republicans are going to be the ones that are going to give you go for what's best for you and your family. Don't vote for an individual. We just saw 74 million people vote for an individual. They didn't vote because they were Republican. They voted for an individual. I can't see anybody saying, I voted Republican and Donald Trump was the best guy. No, I might have sat this one out because he wasn't the best guy. Just like 80 some odd million people voted for Joe Biden. Many of those people voted for Joe Biden because they couldn't stand to vote for Donald Trump. They didn't really vote with their interest in mind. They voted anybody but Trump. Donald Trump people voted because they were supporting Donald Trump. I don't know how we let a reality TV slumlord become the president. Like I said, he wasn't the president of student council. I don't know how he became the president of our country, but it happened. And now we must move on. And we move on with moves like this. You know, I'm hoping every small college town or county area like this picks up prosecuting attorneys that bring in policy that's going to help change things. Because we know Washtenaw County is different than every place around, but we're very similar also to a lot of smaller states and communities that are really vital to this union. And people like yourself, people like Victoria, reshaping the prosecutor's offices, police chiefs like, I've done a lot of homework on Chief Cox, and how he rose up in the ranks, and he rose up organically. He was in the streets and he did a lot of stuff and he rose up organically. He didn't just get appointed because it was his time. The man's put in his work, and we're lucky to have him. And hopefully the politics that have been don't run him away. We need someone like him in the seat in Ann Arbor. And, we need the county sheriff's office to really start performing, at a higher capability. And you keep pushing things along and keep understanding that people are pulling for you. I know you're going to have your naysayers out there. Some people ain't going to like you because you're young. Some people ain't going to like you because of your ideologies. People really can't say they don't like you because you're white, because all the prosecutors been white. So they can't say they didn't like you because you're white. But the way you've opened up people's eyes this early, people need to understand they need to jump back in to this wheel. If you were there at one time, you need to jump back in. We lost a great. We lost Larry Hunter. I don't know if you knew Mr. Hunter or not, but we lost Larry Hunter. And Larry Hunter was a good friend of my father's, good friend of a lot of people in my family. A lot of people have said, you like him. I'm like, no, I'm not. I couldn't even hold his crown. That man did work out here. He did work for years in Washtenaw County. All I'm looking forward to doing is connecting some dots, talking to the right people, putting people in the right positions. People like you, people like Senator Irwin, Sister Arain, I'm going to talk to people that are in power. I don't need to really talk to anybody that's like me. We can have a great conversation, but we're not going to move the needle. The people that are going to move the needle are people that are in play. And I appreciate you sitting back, talking with me tonight. Once again, I've held you later than possible. Hopefully you eat well, because we did this last time and it was might have been a later time, I think, last time. Keep your diet right. I know you don't put on some COVID pounds because you can't hoop. So just be disciplined. Don't be in this thing long, hopefully. But if we are, we got to figure out our ways, to keep our health right, and just keep doing what you're doing. Social media is a great thing because everybody has the privilege of seeing what you're doing front and center. If they want to bitch and moan, that means they haven't read. If they want to just complain because their person didn't get elected, that means they haven't read what you've done. Because I'm sorry, I know the other two candidates. Not really know them closely, but I didn't hear these things in their campaigns. And I didn't hear these type of strategies in their campaigns. And that's why they're there. And that's why we're here. We needed new energy. We needed not to paint the walls. We needed to knock the walls down. So I appreciate you bringing that in. And I've had to correct several people once you gave me the clarification. It's Ellie.
It is.
They're like, it's Eli. No, it's Ellie.
I would call Eli enough. I'll answer to either, but it is Ellie. So
I got it. But I appreciate you, and get home safe tonight. Keep practicing your social distancing. We keep washing our hands. We're gonna wash our fingertips off at some point. But just be safe out here, man. Just know Washtenaw County's pulling for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for
I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great night.
Take care.
So we got Prosecutor Savit to sit down and talk to the BlackWatch. I think that, to me, talked almost 180 minutes. I'm sorry, 2 hours. That's 120, another 16, 100, almost 140 minutes. I appreciate him taking his time out because, frankly, I don't think this would have happened if we had the old prosecutor still at the helm. There would have been no reason for me to talk to the old prosecutor because we would have still had the same situations. We would have had the old prosecutorial rules and policies in place, and there would have been no reason. We still would have been taking cover. But Ellie Savit is a prosecutor for the people. And he is somebody that I believe that everybody needs to rally behind and support because he's got a great team. His chief prosecutor, Victoria, she, hopefully we can get her on this month and to be able to talk about her roles and her ideas about being the chief assistant prosecutor, and even talk about, her taking that turn at Wayne County and what that was like. Because I believe that they got an L there. They got an L. They should have been able to figure out that it was well past Kim Worthy's time, but seeing that they didn't, Washtenaw County got a W. So if you checked out this 100 and almost 40-minute cast, we appreciate you from the Black Watch. Hopefully you'll check out more. We'll be talking to State Representative Felicia Brayback later this week. So definitely check us out there. It's got a lot of great ideas as well. She's one of those people that she's for the people as well. These are the people that are going to push the needle for us if we push them. We can't just sit back and wait for them to do things for us. We've got to put the pressure, we've got to put the ideas together so they can push the policy to the highest levels. So you guys take care of yourself. Keep protecting yourselves out here. If you got to encounter somebody, wear a mask, wear gloves, wash your hands, do what you need to do. It's the Black Watch. We'll see you soon. One love.